Hi everyone, today let's talk about the Bank of Japan. Then we have some charts to go over, and then we'll look at my results for the day and my positions going into tomorrow. If you like trading stocks and options and making money, definitely like and subscribe. I make videos like this every single day, so make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Welcome to the Portfolio Bulletin. Let's get started. So overnight, the Japanese central bank increased their yield targets, making the yen stronger and dropping the dollar and dropping their stock market about 2%. And this was very bad for stocks around the world. Japan historically has had some of the lowest rates in the world. In fact, they were negative rates until now. And now finally, they're starting to see a little bit of inflation and some positive rates. And this was certainly a huge impact on the markets. When we look at the charts, you'll see that we gapped down and moved down throughout the day. However, we did finish just about unchanged on the day. And they highlight that here. You can see the Japanese stock market dropped about 2.5%. Another one of their indexes fell about 1.5%. And the yen strengthened about 3% versus the dollar, which is a huge move for currencies. The Hong Kong index fell 1.3%, and overnight the US stock market fell about 1%, and we regained most of that back into the start of the session, but then fell throughout the session. And like I said, we moved down and chopped around throughout the session because of this unexpected report. The Japanese central bank did highlight that they will not hesitate to ease monetary policy further. And they also said that they're going to continue to buy bonds, so they're still pushing liquidity into the markets. But at the same time, they're raising interest rates. So they're trying to do kind of two things at the same time. And we'll see exactly how that works. The Federal Reserve is currently raising rates and selling their balance sheet. So we are restricting monetary policy in both ways, and they're kind of trying to do both things at the same time. So that'll be interesting to see how that materializes. Either way, this is just pointing to the fact that the entire world is tightening monetary policy, and then of course that is going to be bad for growth, at least in the short to midterm. Moving over to the S&Ps on the 15-minute chart, you can see we rallied into the after hours yesterday, and then we fell in the pre-market today, and then we actually jumped up pretty high, came back and retested those pre-market lows. And then we pretty much rallied throughout the day, turning out to be a slight gain. Jumping over to the 1 hour, you can see we had strong momentum throughout the day, but we didn't quite follow through on that. And you can see momentum started to fade in the later hours into the after hours. RSI still ticking up here, so showing a little bit of strength. And then the more clear indicator for potential upward movement is the 4-hour chart here. You can see we have continuing downward movement on momentum for the 4-hour, and RSI did tick into the positive again here today. And hopefully we finally get that move up and retest that 21 at least, if not a little bit higher, before we get the continuation to the downside. Moving over to the NASDAQ, similar story. We did rally a little bit more aggressively into the after hours yesterday before we got that same dip, tested that support level, which did hold. Big rally from there, big sell-off. Once again, found a higher low here. And then similar to the S&Ps, kind of meandered through the rest of the day, closing slightly negative on the day. You can see in the after hours, we actually found a little bit of momentum here to the upside, closing at 270.32 after we closed in the market session at about 269.50. So a little bit of bullish price action similar to what we saw yesterday, and hopefully we get a continuation of that momentum. Similarly, on the 4-hour, you can see some big steps down on that momentum. RSI ticking up. This is giving you strong indicators that we're going to see a bounce. Still remains to be seen how strong that bounce is. Of course, we would like to see a retest of these lows somewhere in the 279.50 level. But it might be a little bit more feeble than that. It wouldn't surprise me if we stalled out in the 275 to 277 zone. But either way, it looks like we're going to see a little bit of bullish momentum going into tomorrow and the next day. Moving over to the Russell, actually being the strongest out of the three today. You can see we tested yesterday's lows just for a moment, rallied really strongly, got up to that 144 EMA on the 15-minute chart, and basically went sideways. Did close at about 172.88 after closing yesterday at 172, so about 88 cents gain on the day, but quite a bit of upward price action and potential trading opportunities here. Similarly, on the 4-hour chart, you can see momentum is about to turn bullish here. You can see the moving averages on the MACD are very oversold. We've been talking about that for a while, and we're about to get that cross, and hopefully we get the nice swing up here, potentially into positive territory, giving us that nice big retrace, and then the continuation move to the downside. Moving over to XLE, I don't talk about this one too often. You can see strong bullish price action here today. It's been selling off similarly to XOP, not quite as strong as XOP, but similarly, and it is starting to move up here today. It looks quite strong, getting close to above that 55 EMA on the hourly. Probably going to retest that 144 tomorrow, which is about $1 higher than we are right now. So some potential upside there. And it also looks like we have a solid bottom. Maybe a double bottom is slightly higher than the previous bottom. So either way, double bottom or slightly higher low here. Potential for some upside here tomorrow. I would expect that to fail at the previous high, 86.83. So maybe a few dollars higher than the 144, but I expect to find resistance at that level as well. Moving over to consumer discretionary on the hourly. Similarly, we rallied throughout the session, got stopped at the 21 EMA on the hourly chart. And you can see we had a slight loss of momentum into the end of day here. And it wouldn't surprise me if we came down and retested this bottom. And if the rest of the markets did rally tomorrow, hopefully we retest that bottom and then get a slight move higher, or maybe some sideways price action here on XLP. Moving over to XOP. Similarly to XLE, we have a bottom and a slightly higher low. Seems like we're going to get a little bit of a retrace like we've been talking about. Still waiting to get into that 146, 145 zone, which is the low here from 21 November. And then I would expect that to fail at that level. And then we would get the continuation down. But in the short term, we do have some bullish momentum here on the hourly chart. Snowflake for top gainers today. You can see this has been rough here recently. It's been selling off with the rest of the markets. But here today, it was up about 2%, right up to that 9 EMA on the 4-hour chart. Do want to show the daily chart here because we did have a big rally and then we're kind of in this downward trend here. So potential that this is a bottom seems like solid support here at 135 or so. We've had several interactions and it found support at that level. Momentum is still weak here on the daily chart. Still looks like it's ticking to the downside. Looking at the hourly, you can see we've had quite a bit of volatility here. Lots of ups and downs, momentum swinging wildly to both sides. Potential for a good trading stock here just because of how much movement it has. But either way, looks pretty bullish here, bullish momentum on the hourly. And you would expect this to be the start of one of these pretty big upswings that it seems to have pretty regularly. Also for top gainers, we have Boeing. Boeing has been on a tear. It did bottom out around 129 and then rallied from there all the way up to almost 200. So big move over the last couple weeks. It bottomed right in October along with everything else. But then it hit the November high and really just kind of drifted upwards. Kind of hard to trade this because it does say we have negative momentum on the MACD. We are pretty overbought here. RSI is starting to fade slightly. But the stock is still continuing to go higher. Certainly, Boeing is benefiting from the war in Ukraine and all of the weapons that are being purchased right now, and that should be a good catalyst for Boeing going forward. Moving over to stocks above their 55-day moving average, you can see we got kind of a bounce here. We didn't make a new low. We're sitting on that 144 EMA. Definitely a candle of indecision. Could certainly get a bounce, maybe a fill of this gap here. Come in, retest that 9 EMA, and then we get the turn down. Momentum still weak here on the daily chart. Certainly going to take a little bit more than one day to get a cool off here. But similarly, like we had here, seems like a point where we would start to see a little bit of a bounce going into the next few days. And then we test the 21 EMA, and then we get that waterfall sell-off over the next 2 weeks or so. Moving over to the dollar, I know we talked about potentially breaking out of this trend line, which we did do here for a brief moment, just a few times, broke out, came back below, broke out, came back below, broke out one final time, came back below, tested it right here, and then we pushed down. So, of course, we got that Japanese news about the yen and them raising rates, which is obviously going to weaken the dollar. And that's exactly what we saw here. And that's probably why we saw the markets move up at least a little bit here. We did seem to find a bottom right in this 103.94 area, which is a similar level that we had here. Found support there as well on 13 December. Found resistance there on 14 December as well as later in the session on 14 December. And then found support there on 15 December. So a pretty strong level, multiple interactions, and we found support there once again. We'll say this definitely looks weak. Does say we have some bullish momentum, but I don't know if I believe that. It's probably going to be a little bit of a fake out like we saw here. Strong downward momentum, fading, slightly green, choppy, and then big downward move, kind of like this. And I would expect that to be the same case here. Just a little bit of quote-unquote bullish momentum before we get the continuation down here on the dollar. This seems like a retest of resistance where we did fail and we're going to sell off in my opinion. Moving over to JNK, you can see we had that big gap down yesterday and basically went sideways. We gapped down again today because of that Japan news. Did fill the gap here today, so showed a little bit of strength in the midday, probably because the dollar was selling off. And then we found resistance and we started to sell off here into the end of day. Again, seems like a little bit of a fake out on some bullish momentum. And I would expect this to continue down here in the short term. Worth noting that we are at some support here at about 90.50. If we do break through this gap here, then we have to look to about 89.50 for that gap fill on this move down. Moving over to TLT on the 4-hour chart, you can see we gapped down quite a lot. Finished the day at about 105.30 yesterday, and then we opened here today at 104. Then we fell all the way to the 330 level, which is that same level of support that I thought we might touch. But this momentum looks very weak, and with that new catalyst that we have today, I would expect it to continue to move down, potentially moving into this 102 zone and retesting that 144 EMA here on the 4-hour chart. Momentum on the 4-hour, very strong to the down. Got those oversold conditions on the 4-hour. Looking at the daily chart, we still have quite a bit of room on the RSI to move down. We are crossing that 50 line here today, which is definitely not good for bulls in TLT right now. You would want to see a bounce of the 50 on the daily chart and then hope for that continuation here. At this point, this looks quite weak and selling off much stronger than expected because of the new catalyst, in my opinion. And the trade in TLT needs to see some solid support and a base before we look to turn bullish here on TLT once again. Moving over to the VIX on the hourly chart, not a lot, did gap up on that new information and then sold off throughout the session, making a lower low here today compared to yesterday. Still a little bit higher than the low on 15 December. And if we're going to find support, it seems like we would need to find it here now. Certainly, we could potentially find support at this 2050 level, which seems more likely if we get a rally in the next day or two. We test 2050, then maybe test 1985 or so, which would be a retest of that bottom, which should give us enough time to fill the gaps and move a little bit higher in the markets. And then we get that stronger push higher on the VIX and that final push down on the stock market. Moving over to my accounts for the day, I was able to squeak out about 0.5% of positive gain here today, despite the markets being generally flat. IWM did gain about 0.5%. NASDAQ was negative on the day, so 0.5% on the day for me is pretty good. Did have a little bit of rough trading early in the session, but I was able to make that back and turn positive on the day. In terms of positions for tomorrow, you can see I have one put at 173 on the IWM for tomorrow. I think the IWM is going to move higher. It's pretty strong today. It should be strong tomorrow. NASDAQ couldn't quite be positive on the day, but it did consolidate throughout the session, and it seems like it's going to move higher tomorrow as well, at least in the short term. In terms of positions, I have 2 covered calls here. And you can see it is a little bit negative here because the markets did close at 269.50. But like I showed you, it was up a little bit after hours, and these should be positive right now. I did sell the 171 calls for $1.35 each, and they're at about $84 profit, so about $200 more. And if we do rally tomorrow and we can get executed on these calls, that would be the ideal case. And I do think that's likely going into tomorrow. Let me know down in the comments section if you were surprised by the actions of the Japanese bank. I certainly was. I wasn't tracking that they were putting out information yesterday, or would have put it in yesterday's video. And for them to raise rates is pretty crazy. They've been at negative rates for quite a long time. Otherwise, definitely like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video, and make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.